Hey guys, here we are again. Look at me, still repping the Vortex hat. So you would have received, it's super annoying. There we go. You would have received these questions through Canvas, and I just want to go through them and make sure we know what we need to know when it comes to the rise of socialism, the rise of utopian socialism, the rise of Marxism, and the rise of FDR and modern liberalism, which, while different than obviously communism, is still a leftist socialist idea. So number one on the screen, it says, in class we looked at how the Industrial Rev contributed to the rise of socialism. So how did it? Well, socialism was thought of as a new way to organize society. That new way was born from a rejection of what the status quo was. At that time, the status quo was classical liberal laissez-faire, and people wanted something different. So you cannot separate the advent of socialist ideology from the Industrial Revolution. One directly led to the other. Now, number two says, socialism has one major core belief. Identify and describe this belief. That belief is economic equality. And how do we achieve that? Once again, well, we achieve it through redistribution of wealth. Simple, simple. Number three, according to Utopian Socialism, how is society going to change for the better? Identify the two means in which change will occur. Well, I mentioned in the video before that utopian socialism is not a violent form of socialism the way that Marxism is. And the two ways in which we transform society, according to utopian socialist dictates, is number one, we educate people. And we see Robert Owen doing that in the United Kingdom. And then number two, we improve working conditions, right? And Robert Owen did both of these things in his New Lanark. Now, number four, how was Owen's New Lanark a revolutionary place compared to the cities of the Industrial Revolution? Well, there's a lot of things about New Lanark which were very, very different. Number one, no child labor. Number two, shortened workday hours as far as people going to their jobs. Sick pay, dental and medical benefits, like it was entirely different than what we saw in the cities of the Industrial Revolution. Now, moving on, Marxism, number five. Why is Marxism sometimes referred to as scientific socialism? Well, science is supposed to be a discipline based on proof. It's supposed to be based on evidence. Well, the science behind scientific socialism was the proof that Engels gave Marx in his sociological study of the working class in 1844. So the science of scientific socialism was that sociological study. So basically, this is proof that capitalism is irrational, that it is exploitive. So this is the science of scientific socialism. Now, number six, I'm just going to move down here. According to Marx, all of human history is characterized by what? The answer is class struggle, right? The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. Eventually, boom, like I just squished my face, we're going to get a war between them, right? That struggle is going to lead to class warfare, and then we will see society change dramatically. Number seven, according to Marx, who are the proletariat and who are the bourgeoisie? You ought to know this by now. Proletariat, the workers, right? The 99%, the exploited. The bourgeoisie, the 1%, the owners of the means of production, and they were the exploiters. Now, number eight, according to Marx, what is the only way in which egalitarianism meaning equality in society, will ever be achieved? And the only way we're going to see that happen, according to Marx, is through violent revolution. Number 9, identify the importance of Marx and Engels' work known as the Communist Manifesto. 1848, it is published. 1848 was a year of revolution across Europe, right? People read the Communist Manifesto, and it incited or inspired change amongst them. So it was an incredibly powerful pamphlet. And since the Communist Manifesto, we've seen the embracement of Marxism in countries like Russia, which becomes the Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Vietnam, and other countries like Cuba as well, right? So to say that the Communist Manifesto had a rather large impact on the last, 2 or 150 years of history would be very much downplaying the importance of it. Now, number 10, what was going on in the world that made nations turn into welfare states? It was the Great Depression, right? We didn't mention it anymore because of the lack of time we have here, but in the 1930s, Canada also embraced socialism as well. Here, actually, Canada had the first socialist political party in North America. We had it before FDR and the New Deal. It was a political party known as the CCF, or the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. The CCF, it actually started in Calgary, right? Those dirty socialists down south. So it started in Calgary, and then in 1933, so it started in 1932. In 1933, we see the CCF have a conference in Regina, Saskatchewan, and in that conference, or at that conference, we see them adopt something known as the Regina Manifesto. Ooh, a manifesto, right? That sounds pretty communist, doesn't it? And in that manifesto, they talk about eradicating individual ownership of the means of production, which is like, whoa, that's pretty darn communist. Want to make sure I don't swear. I'm trying to be a better person. Number 11, the welfare state is synonymous with which version of liberalism? Classical or modern? It's modern. What is the welfare state also known as from a rightist neocon perspective? The neoconservative looks at the modern liberal state, the welfare state, and calls it the nanny state. Now, number 12, why was the American economy roaring in the 1920s? It was roaring because of the fact that Europe, which had just been engaging in World War I, their productive capacity was destroyed. America filled that gap, and with American production filling that gap, their economy boomed. The American economy during the 1920s was incredible. And if you look at the music of the 1920s, I don't know how well you guys know it or not, but there's a type of music, a genre called swing music. And it was just, this happy-go-lucky, everyone dancing type of situation where, when people are happy, that's what they do, right? And if you look at the music of the 1930s, it is starkly different, right? There's a stark contrast between the music of the 1920s during that period of optimism and the music of the 1930s during that period of depression. We see people like Woody Guthrie singing songs like I Ain't Got No Home. We hear Al Jolson singing songs like Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, right? Just because people were struggling so much. All right, number 13, in general, what differentiates a recession from a depression? Couple of things. Number 1, it is the severity of how much the economy actually goes down. Recessions are a small blip, whereas depressions are a huge blip. The next thing is the length of time. Recessions typically, 3 to 6 months, a depression beyond 6 months. And then the third major difference between a recession and a depression is the scope in which the number of economies it impacts. So recessions typically are more localized, whereas depressions tend to filter outwards. The Great Depression, this thing that started in America, filtered out to the rest of the world. And I like to think of it as like a rock being dropped in a pond, right? That rock being dropped in the water is, it was the United States of America in 1929, but that ripple effect broadcasts out to everybody. Now, number 14, describe Roosevelt's 3 R's of his New Deal. So the New Deal, 1933, as soon as he's inaugurated as president, he gets to work because that's the kind of guy FDR is, right? He doesn't kid around. So the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. Relief for the unemployed and poor, recovery of the economy back to normal levels, and reform of the banking system in order to not have another repeat collapse of the banking system, which ultimately caused panic and caused people to pull their money out, which meant there was no liquidity in society as far as money in the system. And it just ushered in just this panic that swept across the United States and made life pretty miserable for quite a long time. And then number 15, along with the New Deal during the 1930s, what other major American spending program really helped the U.S. turn its economy around? And the answer was World War II. War is really good for economies. So in 1939, once the war started, right, Hitler invades Poland, we get the U.S. supporting its allies. It's not a part of the war yet, right? We don't see the U.S. joining World War II until 1941 after Japan attacks them. So while the U.S. wasn't involved directly, I mean, they were supporting their allies, right? So we start to see the American economy improve at that time, but then truly it improves once Japan stupidly attacks the United States at Pearl Harbor, and this leads to basically total mobilization of the American economy, and it became a giant once again. Anyways, guys, that is it for these questions. Again, as always, let me know if you have any questions, and yeah, peace out. We'll see you later. Have a good day.